welcome back. In this episode we're going to talk about the Ark in the Sanctuary and the condition for having an active sanctuary service. The Ark were, after it had been made, to be placed into a sanctuary along with 5 other large holy objects. The sanctuary consisted of a tent with a courtyard. Both the tent and the courtyard was closed in by a fence, and there was only one entrance into the sanctuary. The first item we encounter was an altar, the second a cleansing basin. Then we enter what was called a holy place, where the table of shewbread were, which always had 12 pieces of bread lying on top. The fourth item was a candlestick with 7 arms, and the last item in this department was the altar of incense. All the items had in common that they needed weekly attendance. The bread was changed once a week, making sure that there were bread there at all times. They also had to have lights on the candlesticks burning at all times, and the incense was also always to go up before the Lord. Behind the next veil was the place that was called the Most Holy Place, and it contained the Ark of the Testimony with the mercy seat on top. And a high priest that were to enter the Most Holy Place once a year with the blood of the yearly sacrifice. The Apostle Paul says about this sanctuary and these priests, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the law, who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle, foresee, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount. So the priests were performing a ritual that were to be a shadow of something greater that they were all waiting for. So briefly back to Eden. This is where man was first separated from God, because at the end of the day, it's all about God's solution to what once started here. And this is basically the key sentence to this study in this episode. Man was separated from God because of sin. The sanctuary showed God's solution to reunite man with himself. The Lord was visible to Adam and Eve in the garden, but after they sinned, he had to hide himself in a pillar of cloud, seeing man could no longer behold him while they were in rebellion. God's law, the foundation of God's authority, was condemning them. There was no peace between the Lord's kingdom and the sinners. If God removed his law in order to save them, he would have allowed sin. Instead, his plan was not to remove the law or call it unrighteous. He decided to go through with the penalty, but still he decided to save the sinner by giving them a chance of salvation through a substitute sacrifice. The sanctuary was therefore made to show how the sinner would be reconciled with God, how the accusation against the sinner could be blotted out, not by removing the law, but by respecting the law. Man were to place their sin unto a lamb, an ox, or another chosen sacrifice, and then sacrifice it. All this by the help of a mediator or priest. Then the blood was carried into the sanctuary, and once a year it was taken all the way into the most holy place and sprinkled upon the mercy seat. In the original Hebrew text, the word mercy seat is really called kaporeth, from the word kapar, which means a place of atonement. To atone is to make amends or reparation as for an offense or a crime. You get the point. So the seat of the ark were to be a place to make amends. But for what? What is the crime? The blood were to be sprinkled above the law, because it was this law that had been broken. John says, whosoever committeth sin transgressed also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. And the only way to restore this relationship and unite the two, God and man, was for God's violated law to be respected and obeyed. And this respect is shown in the blood sacrifice that are placed on top of the law. It's a statement from God that there is no reunion without the demands of his law being heard and followed. But he also accepts a substitute that can take the punishment in our place. In Psalms it is written, mercy and truth are met together, righteousness and peace have kissed each other. And this is the perfect description of the combination of the two parts of the ark. And the beauty and perfection in this plan is that God doesn't change the foundation of his kingship, nor alters what he himself claims is righteousness or justice. Instead of removing, he adds mercy. He doesn't change things. Mercy is placed on top, above the law. It does not replace it. If we are to prevent chaos in our society, we cannot remove the laws, but we can create a way out, a chance of a new start, by mercy. But God did not take away the consequences, the death penalty for the crime. The mercy was in giving us a substitute to die and pay the penalty on our behalf, and this is all illustrated in the sanctuary service. By only having one entrance and 5 objects to pass before coming before the throne, it illustrates the different steps that had to be taken for the sinner to be purified or sanctified, and for the demands of the law to be fulfilled. The items was in fact tools for the priest to reunite man with God. Later, we're going to look deeper into what these items was a shadow of. Since the sanctuary on earth was a copy of the true sanctuary in heaven, it shows us that whatever happened there, it was telling us about something going on in heaven, or that we're going to start in heaven. Also, do not misunderstand the whereabouts of God's real throne. The original throne is not in the sanctuary in heaven as one of the items. Yes, that is my claim. The reason is that the sanctuary system, whether it be the one on earth or the one in heaven, is an illustration or a work field to reunite or to bring reconciliation with God. So when God takes his throne into this sanctuary, it is because of the work of reconciliation is being done there. This means that when God is in the sanctuary, it's a temporary location. He wasn't there before man's fall, and he won't be there anymore when the work there is done and sin has ceased to exist. The sanctuary is only in function when the law has been violated. In the book of Daniel, we see that God's throne is movable. This is an important point to understand. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000,000 ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. So here we read that a scene of judgment is about to take place, and when that happens, God's movable throne with wheels are moved to the place where the judgment is to take place. So the ark in the sanctuary is a throne or a footstool especially used at a time of reconciliation and judgment. And I'm devoting an entire episode to this subject later. We, as sinners, cannot come before the throne of God. We need a mediator to mediate on our behalf. But the sanctuary in Israel is lost and no longer performed. It cannot therefore help Jews or us. So are man lost? Don't we have any longer a substitute to take our place and to defend us like the priest defended Israel by the blood sacrifice? Is there no one to mediate for us today? Are we doomed after the sanctuary on earth was destroyed? In the sacrificial system, God tells us that in order to be reconciled with him, we need to, 1, someone who can enter into a covenant with us. 2, have a mediator or a priest to enter before God's throne of judgment on our behalf. And 3, have the blood of a substitute. Because the law cannot be removed, someone must take the punishment. The sanctuary is representing a way out. It's representing a way to be reconciled. There is no reconciliation without it. But it was not just anyone who could enter the sanctuary in heaven and make a plea on our behalf. The priest has to be holy. He has to be at peace with God in order to represent the people. And if he is to walk into the heavenly sanctuary, he needs to travel to heaven. But something had to happen before the priest could go into the sanctuary service. You see, before a sanctuary service could start, God had to make a covenant with the people involved. before the earthly sanctuary could start or begin, God had to make a covenant with the people whose sins were going to be represented in the sanctuary. That is just what happened before the earthly sanctuary started. Moses became a mediator as a shadow of heavenly things, and a covenant was made between God and the people. This covenant was confirmed by Moses, and we're going to look a little bit on how this covenant was confirmed. He mediated between God and the people, telling God they had agreed on keeping his commandments. And all of the people answered together and said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses returned the words of the people unto the Lord. So here's an agreement. Then the law was given to the people. The mediator Moses wrote down the law in a book. He built an altar by the foot of the mountain. He built 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. He asked them again to enter into the covenant of a free will. He took blood and water and sprinkled it upon the words of the covenant. He sprinkled blood on the people. He said, "Behold the blood of the covenant." He also especially elected 70 of the elders to see the Lord as a witness for the rest of the people. So when this work had been done, the priest could start the sanctuary service. The base of reconciliation was made, the hope that the sinner would turn from his ways, and because of that, he would be given a second chance through the work of the mediator. Moses not only let them know that it was all made after the image of heavenly things, but also that he himself was an illustration of someone who was to come and save humanity. "The Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me, unto him ye shall hearken." About 30 AD, a man started a ministry and indicated that he was the Messiah, the promised one. His real name was Yeshua, but in Latin his name is later known as Jesus, or in English, Jesus. The word Christ is Greek and means the anointed, which again in Hebrew is Messiah. But there was a large number of the scribes and the Pharisees that didn't acknowledge this man as the Messiah. He didn't seem to do what they had expected that the Messiah would do. He was to reign as a king and bring all nations into obedience to him, as it was written, "Behold my servant, whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth. I have put my spirit upon him. He shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles. He shall not fail nor be discouraged, till he have set judgment in the earth, and the isles shall wait for his law." Not even Yeshua's own disciples understood what he was doing. He was peacefully healing the sick, rebuking his own leaders, and didn't seem to take any action to take the throne of Israel from the corrupt king they had there. He taught the people on how to keep God's law correctly. He said he was the living Torah, the law in practice. He was tutoring the people and calling them to reconcile with God, and that this reconciliation could only take place through trust in him. He was clearly representing himself as the mediator between God and man, saying, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me." But was Yeshua really someone who could compare with Moses and what Moses did? Did Yeshua fulfill the Torah when becoming a mediator? So let's look at Moses' list again and compare. He mediated between God and the people, telling God they had agreed on keeping his law. And Yeshua said, "If you love me, keep my commandments, and I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another comforter, that he may abide with you forever." The law was given to the people, and Christ was always trying to make them follow God's commandments and stop sinning. During his entire ministry, he was preaching God's law, and perhaps the most famous speech is in Matthew 5.